Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Okay, I'm back again soon. And so is H. Reardon. I'm probably not going to do 3 streams tonight. I think 2's probably going to be enough. I've been hitting the sangria, and yeah, white wine sangria. It's quite delicious, but I'm also very, very tired. Some of you know, yeah, just super. A lot went on today. So let's just leave it at that. But what we are doing right now is something that is normally just for on my Patreon page, which is, let me find that thing here, because this is the teaser to try to encourage you all to join my Patreon community, which is patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I think I'm going to start doing the book discussions live there. I noticed Patreon has added some new features that I need to experiment with. But the rest of the chapters going forward in the discussion of this book will be on Patreon. After things have been on Patreon for about a year, I do release them publicly. You might have seen I did a big dump. Oh God, that came out entirely wrong. Oh, that will need to be a TikTok clip. I unprivated a bunch, let's just put it that way, a bunch of videos last week of some older patron only content, which I do after it's been private for about a year. But if you want to be in on the conversation while it's going. So I finished The Problem of Political Authority. It took a really long time because it was an ideologically just intense, dense book. And so much was going on with the LNC in my life that there was periods of months sometimes where I just didn't get to it. Hopefully not going to do that this time. So the book that's on the docket now, the book that's on the docket now is Michael Malice's The Anarchist Handbook. I adore Michael Malice. So we're gonna do like I do. We're gonna do like I do. And this is a habit I picked up from. I've said this on Patreon quite a bit. When I was in school, my English teacher required us to read a book by, I think his name is Mortimer Latimer, but it's called How to Read a Book. So it's a book on how to read a book, but that's actually an excellent book. I would highly suggest you get it. The funniest review on Amazon, though, for How to Read a Book was, I can't wait for the sequel, How to Read a Second Book. But it tells you what to do when you first get a book in your hand. And it also, some people, and I know some of you out there will think I'm the biggest heretic. I dog-ear pages. I write all over shit. Like, to me, books are meant to be devoured and enjoyed and highlighted and, you know, not preserved in some case. You know what I mean? By the end, there'll be coffee stains and food. I'll have lived with these books. They will look well loved. So if any of you get shocked by that, but that was something I learned from How to Read a Book. We should do a book discussion on how to read a book. But in that book, it tells you one of the first things you should do even before reading is get familiar with the layout of the book. You know, examine the front. See if it has a table of contents. See the relative length of each chapter so that you can be mentally prepared if you want to read a chapter at a time for when you go into your reading time, what you're getting into. Examine really the table of contents. You know, those sorts of things to get prepared. Now, I called this the preface. I don't think it technically is the preface, but it's short and it's not attributed to... Okay, first let me just explain what this book is. Like Michael Malice says on the cover, he doesn't say written by Michael Malice. He says organized by Michael Malice because it's a collection of essays written by other people. What's labeled chapter 1 in this book isn't attributed to an author, and it's an intro to the book. So to me, that's more appropriately called a preface. In here, it's actually called chapter 1. So you will see, I will skip, if you're one of my patrons, from preface to chapter 2. So what I am calling the preface, Mr. Malice, is, again, chapter 1. And his inscription is really interesting. We're going to have to put on my old lady glasses here. So it's to Eric D. Dixon. I don't know who that is. But with the little quote underneath the inscription is, "Who got there first?" Not sure if that's some kind of inside joke. What I'm reading into it is what some people don't like about this book. In particularly American libertarian circles, we like to pretend like we were the first libertarians or anarchists or get to define what it means, when actually these words have been used and some of the concepts in Europe going way far back. The original anarchists don't look anything like libertarian anarchists. They would find the merging of anarchy with capitalism incomprehensible. And they would say that you can't be an anarcho-capitalist. I obviously have defended that you can be on multiple videos, particularly when I was doing a review of the HBO series, The Anarchist. But you see this meme sometimes in American libertarian circles that say, oh, you're a libertarian socialist? That's cool. I'm a banana octopus. And they think they are just so clever without realizing that the people who used the word libertarian first, not in America, though there was probably some of them in America, but primarily in Europe, were in fact socialists. We kind of stole the word. You can't steal a word, but we co-opted it. So while within the context of American libertarianism, particularly Libertarian Party USA, the idea of a libertarian socialist, unless it is completely incomprehensible. And most people who call themselves that are actually libertarians in the LPUSA sense, are actually not socialists. They're communitarians. There's no such thing as voluntary socialism. I'm sorry. I've done shows on this. That is like asking what the color purple tastes like. It's a certain presupposition about property and rights, and honoring rights. The foundational theory of rights isn't a voluntary thing. Like, it's just different definitions. So the idea of, oh, we're cool with socialism as long as it's voluntary. My first question is, well, what happens when someone decides they want to keep their property? Can they opt out? If the answer is no, because rent is theft or any of the other ridiculous things that some of the quote-unquote libertarian socialists were saying in 2018, then it's not voluntary. It's not any more voluntary in that sense as the fundamental presuppositions that we have as free market, want to say capitalist, want to say laissez-faire, whatever it might be. So Michael Malice delves deeply into the history of anarchists, and most of them would not have agreed with me on many things, or other libertarian anarchists. He gets into the early anarchists. And the fact is, why I call myself a libertarian anarchist in the context of American society is the word anarchy simply means you don't believe in rulers. There's all kinds of other things that can be added onto that, like a rejection of all hierarchies. And as I said in the last video, look to the lobsters, hierarchies are inevitable. It's a matter of whether they're chosen or unchosen. And not, I would say even the majority of anarchists are not non-aggression principle anarchists. They are violent. And a libertarian anarchist is not violent. So simply saying anarchist is a bit vague. I do think it requires a qualifier to be specifically understood. So, like he says on the back, so, you know, the black flag, as you know, is like the anarchist symbol. And the reason why ANCAPs use the black and yellow is to show that they're anarcho-capitalists. But so, it's like he says on the back, the black flag of anarchy comes in many colors. So there will be essays that we will be reading in this book of anarcho-communists, people we would fundamentally disagree with, except for their belief in the absence of political rulers. Now, you might say they're still advocating for us because they have different theories of property rights and things like that. Very well. But I'd like to see where some of the traditions I hold to come to. And so, in the first chapter, so that was a big intro. I can tell you, okay, you all know I'm a big baby to begin with. Like, God, I am such a big baby. When I used to watch TV, because I had a life, and that was before the Libertarian Party, like sappy, sad commercials would make me cry. Like, it doesn't take much to get me all weepy. Ask JJ. He's made me cry multiple times. But I tell you, this first chapter was only 3 pages, and it already made me cry. So Michael Malice, when he was talking about writing this book, he talked about what an emotional experience it was writing this book and how deeply humbling it was. And the reason is you are dealing with people, even today, even if you're a monarchist, you might not be an anarchist. If you're a libertarian, you're a freaking radical in this country. And then when you start getting into libertarian anarchists, like you're the radicals of the radicals. To think differently than most people around you is a very risky thing. And there's a great risk of you being wrong as well. I mean, what are the chances? Like, you're right and the 99 other people are wrong. But it does happen. And those of us who've embraced this very alternative philosophy obviously think that has happened. But the people who were doing this before modernity, and even up into it, because like this first chapter, I don't know if every single person in each of these chapters dies at the end of the chapter, but at the end of the first chapter, you got 4 dudes being hanged. Like, these people lived and died for what they believed. And that should be both inspiring and humbling and sad. So let's just do some highlights from what I'm calling the preface, Mr. Malice, but he calls chapter 1. So I just highlighted a few things that I thought captured the essence of this. So, and it's funny, he mentioned, he calls here, anyone here who's theologically minded, this word will probably trigger you, but he said antinomianism in ethics is anarchism in a socio-political context. The belief that the imposition of authority is illegitimate. I don't actually agree with that statement. So I'm disagreeing right off the bat. But antinomianism, for those of you who are really deep into Christian theology, like that's a word I remembered back from my theological study days. Anti obviously is without, and the nomianism part means without law. So it was referring to basically the Christian libertines. Believe it or not, that was a thing in the days of the early church, who would say that we're saved, therefore we can't sin. We could do whatever we want. We can indulge in whatever sins, vices, degeneracy, whatever you want to call it, I don't care, self-destructive behavior, and they were the antinomians. I don't think anarchy is antinomianism. I think it's only antinomianism if you define law as something that's imposed by other humans. But I think axioms are laws. So the non-aggression principle or the non-initiation of force principle, I think is a law. It's not a law that was passed by, a group of men in black dresses, but it's a law in and of itself. So I don't think of necessity anarchism is antinomian. Now I might be picking some nits here, but I kind of disagree there. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. I haven't seen the word antinomianism in for like ever. But he said, the line I highlighted, though, that I do agree with, he says, in one sense, anarchism is nothing more than the declaration that you don't speak for me. But I think that also can apply to things other than anarchy. I think monarchists would think the same thing. Everything else is just implementation. Okay, that's a very interesting, I think I might tweet that out. That's a very just interesting little nugget. So, some of this really reminded me of things that Professor Humer said in The Problem of Political Authority. So this one paragraph was almost like I was still reading the other book. He says, there are many common visceral arguments against anarchism. And I do find most of the arguments are visceral. And it's also the prejudice to the status quo, the prejudice towards presentism. But anyway, he says, anarchism is a bad idea because it would lead to a government. To me, that is the funniest argument against anarchy. We can't get rid of our government, which you're saying is bad, because if we do, we'll just end up with a government, which is bad. I like how, was it Robert Higgs put it, getting rid of the government is no guarantee that there won't be murder and plunder and theft on a wide scale, but keeping the government is a guarantee that there will be. But yeah, I love that. Anarchism is a bad idea because it will lead to a government. I'm like, you know that meme where it's the cartoon character going, you know, it's like, make it make sense. Did you listen? Where's my make it make sense? Oh, shit. Right here.
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense. Or, really? It says, anarchism would mean authoritarian warlords being in charge of society. That's almost as bad as the first one because we already have authoritarian warlords being in charge of society. But we just pretend like they aren't. Give me an honest authoritarian warlord any day as opposed to the shit we got now. Anarchism is utopian and hasn't worked anywhere on Earth. Except where it has, in which case it doesn't count, because a government exists somewhere and therefore made it work. Oh, his sarcasm is just so good. Anarchism cannot work on a large scale, and anarchism cannot work on a small scale either, because those areas would be immediately invaded. So basically you're saying that governments are so bad that they would just go and murder everybody who wants to be free. And that's your argument for having a government. Got it. He goes on to say that. See, I read this a few days ago. Inherent in this argument is that governments are, by their nature, invasive and predatory. And this is the anarchist view of government. So you're arguing against anarchy using the anarchist view of government. It's like saying we have to have the mafia protect us or organized crime would come in. And he says, but this all misses the broader point. Anarchism is not a location. Anarchism is a relationship, one in which none of the parties has authority over the other. I would pick a nit again here because I don't, contra other anarchists, I don't think anarchy means in the simplest form without rulers. I think it means without voluntary rulers, without unchosen rulers. Because I think if you are truly free, you can choose to have a ruler. And that, I think, is the difference between American anarchism and a lot of what Europeans would think. But am I truly free if I can't choose to be ruled? No, I don't choose that. But couldn't I have that choice? As long as I had the choice to choose differently later? And I love this statement. I'm not so sure I agree with it. I haven't thought about it deeply enough because, again, I don't know. Some of these, I mean, a lot of times when we're talking about these things, you could make every sentence die the death of 1,000 qualifications. And sometimes you just need to make broad statements. So I'm trying not to be like overly autistic about this. So he also says every nation is in an anarchist relationship with one another. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I understand in a broad sense what he's saying. So what is the alternative to the state? Private police or none at all? The original version of anarchism in the left-wing European tradition is opposed to domination by one person over another and advocates for a society based on mutual aid and complete equality. I wouldn't have worded it equality. I would have worded it equity. Because I do think in the American sense, not the European sense, we believe in complete equality as well, but it doesn't mean equality of outcome. The more recent version, the right capitalists, and I would not call ourselves right, but if you're going to define the right-left spectrum based upon theories of property rights, then yes, we would fall on the right. Define themselves by opposition to the state. Yes, that's the type of anarchist I am. I'm opposed to the state. I'm not opposed to all authority. That, in fact, is just contra human nature. There is always going to be authority. The right anarchists think the left anarchists are naive, basically what I just said, and lack a fundamental understanding of economics. I didn't even get into economics. I would think they lack a fundamental understanding of economics too, but I think that comes down, just you drill it down even more and you're just getting down into human nature. The left anarchists think the right anarchists aren't anarchists at all. I get told that all the time. And like, I don't care because you don't speak for me. But mere apologists for corporate control and predation. Well, I usually throw them for a loop by saying, you know what? I don't think corporations are remotely libertarian, and I'm anti-corporation. Anarchism has been both a vision of a peaceful cooperative society and an ideology of revolutionary terror. What most people think about is the latter and not the former, unfortunately. Since the term itself, anarchism, is a negation, there is a great deal of disagreement on what the positive alternative would look like. The black flag comes in many colors. And interesting, again, for those of you who are Christians, you know, I'm always going to drag that into it. I did study theology for a really long time. If you're familiar with the Koine Greek, you'll recognize the word arche, which means rulers. So anarchism is without rulers, but in the book of Revelation where it says Christ is above all powers and authorities, and one of those words is arche. But here's like, this is where I was like, okay. And then I read this and I was like, oh, I gotta be all up in my feels. So, and this was in this country and not that long ago. So on November 11th, 1887. Okay, so 150 years-ish, a little shy of 150 years. 4 men were hanged or hung. Wouldn't it be hung? Is it hanged or hung? He says hanged, but I think I would have said hung. Were hanged by the state of Illinois. So in America, they were accused of conspiring to murder, but okay, that would be bad, because of their common bond in preaching their anarchist views. So, you know, what I'm reading here is they weren't conspiring to murder. It was the very fact that they were espousing anarchist views that made the state accuse them of conspiring to murder, though even though they weren't conspiring to murder anyone. And they became martyrs for their cause. At the base of the monument erected in their memory, and I would love to go see that, I'm assuming it's in Illinois, are carved the last words of one of them, August Spies. The day will come, he had proclaimed from the gallows, when, it's getting me all choked up again, when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today. So, he then concludes to say what the rest of the book will be like. The Anarchist Handbook is an opportunity for all these many varied voices to speak for themselves from across the decades. These were human beings who saw things differently from their fellow men. They fought and they loved, they lived and they died, and they disagreed on much, but they all shared one vision, freedom. So that is the preface, or chapter 1. And I'm already super, super intrigued. So if you want to follow along with the rest of this discussion, and it is a discussion, the way I do these is I tend to read some highlights, give you my thoughts, hope to hear from you guys as to what your thoughts may be. I have a feeling there's going to be some lively disagreement on some of the things said, but I'm looking forward to reading this book. Okay, I think that's enough for me for this evening. So I hope you guys have a good night, and probably see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's normally my history day. I go down to the storage facility and be in my happy place, playing around with documents. And Winrich is going to be there with me tomorrow. So it should be fun. All right. I hope you all have an awesome evening. Bye-bye.
Gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business, not because they want to